Hey Sketchy friends, in today's video I just want to give you a few quick tips on foliage. So by that I mean like trees, bushes, plants, grass, that kind of thing. Just a few quick and easy ways to add these kind of elements into your scene. They're not the main focus, but they're just kind of background information. So there's just some really nice quick ways to do this, so I really wanted to share that with you today. This is something I have an entire chapter about in my upcoming book called The Beginner's Guide to Urban Sketching, which is going to be published at the end of 2023 and will be available in bookstores across the world, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it coming out now and hitting those bookshelves. So you can pre-order from your favorite book retailer. I've got a link in the description below with lots of different book retailers. If you can't see yours on the list, do go to them. They probably do have it available for pre-order as well. Okay, so in this first example, I want to focus on this kind of fir tree in this reference photo. For this particular tree, the shape is obviously extremely important. It's really characteristic of this particular tree. And I'm going to start by just laying in a lighter green in my set. Now, you can mix your greens, obviously from yellows and blues, and you can get some really beautiful colours that way. I'm a bit lazy. I just prefer having greens ready mixed for me. And in my set, it just makes things quicker, especially when you're on location and you just want to slap down some foliage really quickly. It's just convenient. So in my set, I have currently got 3 greens. This is expanded. I only had 1 before. Very recently, I was given these other 2 to try out and I'm really enjoying them. So they're now in my set. So the one that I've always had the last few years is White Nights, and it is just called green. This is my favorite green in the world. That combined with the Indian yellow in my set is my favorite color combination for foliage, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the 2 recent greens I've got is Green Gold by Daniel Smith and Sap Green by Daniel Smith. So I'm going to start this first one by using the Sap Green. It's kind of like a mid green. It's very flexible. It's a very usable green straight out of the palette. So I'm just going to lay down the basic shapes of that with my brush. This is a round brush. It's a number 10. I do like using big brushes, especially for big foliage shapes. So I'm just putting in the lighter green first, and then I'll leave it to dry just for a minute or 2, and then I'll come back in and put in some of the darker green, which in this instance is the White Nights green that I mentioned. And you can just see that interplay of the mid green with the dark green and how much more interesting it looks than if I'd just painted this tree just straight with the darker green. There's just a bit more color variation. And where I left it to dry just a minute or so, it hasn't completely run in with each other. It's kind of, there's still some defined bits as well. So in this picture, I can also see some long kind of grasses, I guess they're called. So again, here I will go in with my sap green, which is the mid green. I'm using a smaller brush here, using a number 6. It's a smaller plant. And again, just flicking my brush, keeping it nice and organic. We're painting foliage. It is by its very nature, it's organic. So just being very loose with those shapes. And then I'll leave that one. I'm also seeing some orangey kind of grasses as well. So here I'm using Indian Gold, which is, it's kind of like a yellow ochre, quin gold kind of colour. So I do the base layer with that. And then obviously that, again, there's colour variation. So you want to put another sort of slightly darker colour. In this instance, I've just got a bit of a reddish brown already on my palette. So I think that's an English red mixed with a raw umber, but any kind of reddish brown maybe you can make with your colours. Then you can just put that, and you can see I've done it straight away. So it was very wet and I've added it in, and you can see how it's blended and it's really soft, like one colour just flows into another. Whereas if I come back now and add the darker green onto this, the darker green will stay defined because the sap green that I put down first is already dry, so the colours won't flow into each other as much. So this is really fun to play with wet and wet, and look at the different effects you can get with if you add a second colour almost immediately, or if you add a second colour once the first colour is dry, and then stages in between that. So these are really fun, very textural, and very, very quick. Took us like a minute to do that. Okay, so moving on to grass then. So I really like this Indian yellow here, and I like mixing a little bit of the White Nights green with it. So these are both White Nights colours. They came in my initial set, so I'm super used to using them together. And you just get this really nice kind of grass colour, which is this one up here, but I forgot to hit record, so I'm doing this again. So yeah, really nice grass colour. But also I now have Daniel Smith Green Gold, and it's basically the same thing. It's a little brighter, but yeah, I find that that's a great kind of grass colour. If you want to tone this down a bit, you can always mix it with a little sap green, if that's what you've got. A lot of people have sap green in their set. It depends what colour grass you're going for. You can make it a bit greener, less yellow, up to you. You can add a bit of texture to your grass as well, either whilst it's still wet. You can add in some nice brush strokes like this, but because the paint is so wet, it's just gonna move around. You're not gonna keep that texture. But you can see you can add it on the top of the grass here. If you don't want your grass just to be like a flat line, you can just add it there. And it'll soak into the effect there. And you can see it gives it a bit of texture, it gives it a bit more interest to the overall thing. Or you can wait until it's a bit drier, which I think this one is, and then just, you know, dab in some texture here and there. But it's still kind of wet there. But you get the idea. So the idea is to not be so literal and just get an idea of the foliage and the grass and the bushes. You're just creating an impression, and it took me so long to actually grasp that you don't literally have to paint exactly what's there. You're just creating an impression of what's there. Okay, so in this picture we have some palm trees. So again, I'd probably just, it depends how big you're painting, but I'm just going to grab this smaller brush, the number 6 round brush. And you see the tips of the palm trees are like really quite yellow. It can be really tempting just to go straight in with a green for everything. Just look at what your tree is doing. And again, just focus on the shapes, but you don't need to be too literal. So I'm just going to focus on a leaf right now. And white space, leaving some white space, leaving some room for your foliage to breathe a bit, to show that the light is coming through is really important. You don't have to draw or paint every stroke. Leave some white space. So, and while that's still kind of wet, I can mix in, I've got kind of all things going on here, but mix in a sap green and just make it a little darker. And then it's got kind of yellow on the end, and then it kind of starts getting a bit greener. This has got quite a lot of paint on, a lot of water on my brush, so I'm just going to dab it off a bit. And you can see whilst the paint is still wet, it just soaks into one another, and it just creates such a nice effect. And you can just keep making your green darker by adding more sap green. This is the quick way of doing stuff rather than mixing lots of green from yellow and blue. This is the lazy way. So I don't want to go too far up there. I want to kind of keep that end yellow. So, and you can see how that's starting to build like a palm tree kind of color. So again, I'll start with my yellow. And just really trying to see what the shapes are there. And just really using the point of the brush as well. So it's good exercise for brush control, which we've been talking about a lot on my membership lately. Brush control, sketching directly with the brush. And you know, I've got like a whole mess of green going on here. So if while I'm painting it starts getting more green anyway, that's fine. I don't mind that. Whatever's easy. That's kind of my motto. Whatever's easy. Going a bit darker again here. And now we have 2 palm tree leaves. So, and you can keep going like that. Especially if the palm tree is somewhat of a important part of your sketch, you know. There are quicker ways of doing this, but I quite like taking my time and drawing things like these, you know. I do really enjoy drawing foliage. Again, not in a literal way, just in like a fun, loose watercolour way. Okay, so you can see that's all the light stuff done, and in a way you can like map out your painting that way, or your sketch. And then you can just come in with some darker. And you see how it's drier, it's more defined, it's not soaking in and fading in with the other paint we've already put down. So like really in the center of the leaves and everything, it's like really, really dark because like the sun's not reaching there. So I'd encourage you to do, you know, the light layers and then put in some mid green, and then you can, right towards the end, the sort of fun part is when you put in some really dark stuff and it really starts to take shape, you know. Anyway, I won't labour the point, but there we go. That's like palm tree leaves. I'm focusing on watercolour here, but of course you can come in. I can't really see the trunks on these palm trees in this photo, but you can be so loose with this. That's what I love about sketching, is like you can just be super loose. And there's your palm tree, and I think that looks really cool. But of course you can also come and paint the trunk if you want. And I really like doing trunks in like kind of a purple colour. I think I somewhat picked this up inadvertently from Virginia Hine, but I really like how some artists do their trunks in purples and greys and stuff rather than brown. And it just looks so much more interesting and alive than if I'd done that in brown. I don't know what you guys think. So yeah, so that's that. And then let's look at another photo. I just want to touch on this a bit. So in this kind of busy street scene where you've got buildings, I'm not going to draw them exactly, but let's just kind of, let's utilize these whole 2 pages here. So let's bring these buildings down here. And let's say this one comes down here and this one comes here. Probably should do this. Should I do this in pen? I don't think it really matters. Maybe it'd be easier for you to see if I do it in pen. Okay, so there's a building there. There's a building there. And then let's just say that there's some stuff going on here. And then there's another building here. Etc., etc. So this is kind of like a street scene. And then in between these buildings, we're like looking down the street or whatever, there's like some foliage here. So it could be like really tempting to maybe draw an outline of the foliage, but you don't need to. You could actually, the softer you keep that foliage, the more depth it's going to bring to the scene, because actually probably your focal point is on these buildings or the scene itself. And the fact that there's some foliage, big trees and stuff in the background is just, you know, background information, basically. So let me just make sure this is dry, and then we'll put in some of that. I like to start with a yellow. In my case, this is an Indian yellow, but it's There's a bit of green already in there because I just use it pretty much exclusively to mix green with. So experiment with the yellows in your set and see what you like the best. But I really just, and this is just so quick and easy, I like to start the top of the tree with yellow because it's usually where the sun is hitting it. My ink is not dry yet. So I generally like to start with that yellow colour at the top. And then I'll just use the one green that I'm used to using. I'll just add a smidgen of it in. So I'm going from pure yellow, just adding a smidgen of the green in, and then just coming down, dotting it about here and there. And again, the effect you get will depend on how long you've left this first top layer. So if you come in straight away, it's going to blend really nicely, really seamlessly. But if you leave it a bit, you'll get a bit more texture. And then I'm going to take my mixture that I have and I'm just going to add even more green to it, make it even darker. And again, I'm just splodging it in. Just, it creates a bit more visual interest. And again, it's quite wet, so it probably will just smooth itself out, but you can always come back over the top and, you know, add in a bit more texture if you want. So I'm just letting watercolour do its thing, really. And then I'll add even more of the green and make it much darker to come down here where the shadows are. And then, if you want your green even darker, what you can do is take your mixture and then add indigo, which is a very dark blue. So any colour you've got, like a dark blue, you might not have indigo exactly, but some kind of dark blue. And that's just going to make it even darker to come down here with. Like almost like get into black kind of thing. Very, very, very dark. You can even put pure indigo on top there. And you see how that's like a really fun gradient. There's no detail there because, you know, imagine you've drawn all of these buildings, this street scene, like you're seeing the reference photo, and then this is just a pop of colour in the background. And that's as easy as it needs to be, you know. You don't need to go in any more detail than that. Nice yellow at the top, mid-green in the middle, dark green at the bottom. That's it. You don't have to go crazy painting all the individual leaves or anything like that. So I hope that has helped you guys. That was just a very quick tips on painting foliage. Don't be scared to have green in your set. I know a lot of people say it's more interesting to mix yellows and blues, but when I'm out and about sketching, I just prefer to have the greens that I like, and I can adjust them with other colours to make them a slightly different green if I need, but at least I've got that base colour ready. So I hope that's helped. If you've got any questions on foliage, let me know. This was just a very basic introduction, but there is also more information in my Beginner's Guide to Urban Sketching, where I go into more detail about different types of trees and bushes, hanging baskets even outside of pubs, because I do love a good pub. Hanging baskets are a major feature of pubs, and pot plants, all that kind of thing. So do check it out. Do consider pre-ordering it. That would be really awesome. And yeah, thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one.